Okay, so today you guys got your exercise 205 handout, and we're at a point in the semester where basically I have to build your Rhino skills. And so as much as I would like to give you complete free reign on what we're making, there's a certain scripted set of things that I need you to learn how to make first, and then I'll start giving you more free reign in terms of you make your own stuff. So we're going to work with an angular object today. Next class we'll start to work with round objects and tubes and sweeps and that sort of thing. So it's really about building skills. Because of that, it's really kind of boring. Everybody's is going to look the same, but it is what it is. And so I'm going to go through exercise 205 today and kind of walk you through step by step how it works. One of the nice things about Rhino is we can model from the large picture down, or we can model from the small picture up. And so in this instance, we're basically going to take an object and we're just going to add progressive layers of detail to it to make it more and more interesting, so to speak. And then we'll do the opposite eventually, where we'll do a broad gesture and then we'll slowly add some more detail to it, etc. And so we'll explore those as we go along. I'm going to go ahead and open Rhino so we can get started. I'm going to pick a large object inches again as my template. And I'm going to start by drawing in the top view just some basically this shape that's on the bottom of your piece. And this is actually, it's a pretty good shape to start with because it tests whether you really understood the coordinate system, right? So I'm going to start at point 0, 0 with a polyline. So I have my Polyline tool selected. I'm going to start at point 0, 0. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn on ortho so that I can go up in a straight line. And we knew that I need to go up 36 inches, so I'll go ahead and type 36 inches. There it is. And now I'm going to follow over by 4 inches, like that. Now this next one, I have to go down and over, right? And if I turned on grid snap, technically I could do it, but this is a perfect opportunity to use my coordinate systems, right? So I'll go ahead and type the @ sign. And this time I know that in the x direction, so in the horizontal direction, I want to go -2. So I have at -2, comma, I want to go down by 36 inches, so -36. And it would help if I actually typed it correctly, sorry. Give me a second. I clearly cannot type today, I apologize. All right, so it's at -2 inches, comma, -36 inches, there. So I get that sloping line because I used the coordinate system. Could I have done it with some smaller, a smaller set of lines and then redrawing? Sure. It's just, if I can do it in one move, that's nice. So then I'm going to go down by 6 inches. There. And then here's another opportunity for the coordinate system. This time I'm going over 30 inches, so I'll say at 30, comma, and I'm going down 6, so -6, and I get that point. And then we can go back up, so this would be at 30, comma, +6 inches this time, there. And then I'll go up 6 inches, and then this is going to be, again, at -2, comma, 36. To get that point, we're going over 4, down by 36, and then I'm going to type C for close so that I close this shape. So that's the shape that I drew, right, which is exactly the shape that you're seeing here. Right? If I didn't want to draw it that way, I could draw it any number of other ways. The key is that we ultimately want a completely closed shape. Right? So if I drew it, let's say I drew it over here, and I didn't start right on the origin, I could still draw, 36, and then I could go over 4 inches, and we'll finish it. And then I'll go down. Let me turn on my snaps here. I could use a little guide here. We'll go over 36, and then I'll go over 2, and then I'll finish, and then I'll draw that piece in. and then I'll delete this piece. And so you could clearly do it, right, using little guides to get there. It's just faster if you use the coordinate system and you get your overall shape drawn. Okay? So once I have that shape drawn, it's a matter of starting to build it into 3D, right? And you guys will see this a little bit better. So I'm going to switch out of the top view and into the perspective view, right, where I'm starting to see this. So you can see that this is a review of the first class so far, and we're about to review what we did last class. Okay? So I'm going to move and work with this object. I'm going to use the rotate 3D command, which is Rhino 5.6, right, which we've done before. I'm going to select my object. I'm going to go up to transform. I'm going to go to rotate 3D. It's going to say start of rotation axis. So we'll pick this line here as my rotation axis. There's the end of the rotation axis. My reference point would be right here. And then I'm going to fold this up into the third dimension. Okay? I'll do it one more time. So I have my shape flat. I'm going to go to transform, rotate 3D, select objects to rotate. There it is. I'll hit enter. Start of rotation axis will be right along this plane. End of rotation axis, there. Reference point will be up this line, and I'll fold it up. Okay? So why don't I stop for a second, let you guys all get to this point, and then we'll keep going. Yeah? The large object inches? Yes. It's supposed to show up. Hold on a second. Okay, everybody seems far enough along now. I'm going to keep going. So I have the first shape here. I've done the rotate 3D to get it up into the vertical plane. A couple people were trying to do the rotate 3D just in the top view, and you get stuck because you can't see the third dimension. So make sure you switch over into the perspective view to get that rotation and to be able to see it. If you don't have ortho checked, let me go back a step here. If I don't have ortho on and I do the rotate 3D, start of rotation axis, end of rotation axis, reference point, and I'm trying to figure out where vertical is. If you don't have ortho on, if you hold down shift, it'll jump to being just at the 90 degrees for you. So that's another way of doing it. Okay? So now that I have this, I'm going to use the offset command, which we've done before. It's under curve, offset curve. I'm going to select my object, and I'm going to offset by 48 inches. So I'll type enter, and then 48, enter. Now, you see how it's trying to let me offset it, right? And if I were to do it, it would be offsetting it around my object. That's not the direction I want it to offset. I want it to offset going back. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat the offset. My distance is still the same. This is my object. But I'm going to change which view I'm in. That's doing such a good job. Let me initiate the command in a different view. Say this one. Oh, come on. Let me do it in the front view then. Are you all going to be cranky at me? Sorry, I had an option checked here. It should say in C-plane, yes. Right? And then it will offset in the correct direction. I apologize for why I had that turned off by default. So as long as in C-plane is checked yes, you should be able to go back, right? Which gives me basically a copy of my object. Alternatively, you could do a copy and create the second object. Either way, works out fine. Ultimately, you could do an extrude. That would do the same thing, right? So this is one of the things about Rhino. There's 10 different ways to do the same thing. I'm just showing you one way. Okay. Once I have these two curves, I can do a loft between individual curves, but I can also do a loft of all the curves at once. And sometimes it's easier to do a loft of all the curves. So I'm going to go up to Surface and then Loft. And it's going to say Select Curves to Loft. I'm going to pick this curve and this curve. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter. Now this matters because I have a continuous set of curves. I want to make sure that these two arrows are, one, pointing the same direction, and two, start at the same point. So if we look here, we see the little white arrow starts there. We see the little white arrow starts there. They're both pointing up, which is good. And if I go ahead and hit Enter now, I'll get the loft options. The default options are just fine. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And let me go ahead and turn this into shaded mode. And we see that I now have the basic shape that I was talking about. Okay? I need to build up the surfaces on either end. And I can do that using the surface from 3 or 4 corner points. It's actually a little bit easier method of doing it. I believe that on the handout I say to use the patch command. I think this works a little bit easier. So we'll do the 3 or 4 corner points. And the nice thing about this is it's going to divide it into nice little shapes for me. So there's the first one. I right-click to repeat, and I'll do the second one. This. Now, on these corners, because of what I'm going to do next, it helps to just do a little triangle in the corner. So I'll do 1, 2, and 3. I'll hit Enter to finish. And I'll do 1, 2, and 3. We'll hit Enter to finish. And then I'm going to do 1, turn on midpoint here, 2, 3, 4, 4. Okay, so I have those done. Now I can repeat these and do them again on the back side, or right, I can take this, and I'm going to hold down Shift, this, and I can do a copy. So I'll go up to Transform, Copy, and I'll copy from one side to the back side, and now I have them on both sides. Okay. Now, in reality, you really there's a lot of as you increase your efficiency in modeling, something like this, we end up with 4 identical sides. So I really only need to model a corner. And so if I were modeling it, I would probably only model a corner. And I'm going to show you how I would model it just so that you can see an alternative way of doing it. Okay? So I'm going to start. Let me turn on ortho here. I'm going to draw just half of this side. So I'll say 36, 4, at negative 2, comma 36. Oops, negative 36, sorry. At 36. 6 inches at 30 on negative 6. Draw this over. Okay, so I end up with this shape. Rotate 3D. Fold it up. There it is. I'll offset this by 48. There it is. Take this, and I'll loft them. Oops, this should have been 24, sorry. I move this back by 24, because I'm only modeling a quarter of it. Go. I'll do my surface from 3 or 4 corner points. Right? So I modeled basically 1/4 of it. Once I have that quarter, I can take my object and I can use the mirror command, and I can mirror this object that way. And then I can take all of this and mirror it this way. So I can save myself a bunch of work by modeling just a piece of it and then using mirror to duplicate it. So it's just another way of modeling it. And as you get faster and better at modeling, you'll start to use some of these shortcuts yourself as you go forward. It doesn't really matter how you created it. Once you get to this stage, we're going to start adding some more detail to it. Okay? So this is designed to be like a little segment of a concrete bridge. And in an ideal world, we're going to take these and we're going to glue them together and we're going to make like a little bridge. And so I want to add some progressive layers of detail. And the first thing that I'm going to do is soften the corners using a little chamfer on the surface. So I'm going to go to Surface, Chamfer Surfaces. And I'm going to specify my distance as being a 1/2 inch. So I type D for distance, and then 0.5 and 0.5. And then it's going to say select first surface to chamfer. So I'm going to select this surface here, and then select the second surface. It's going to be like that. You see that I get that nice little bevel on the edge. Okay? I'm going to repeat this, so I'll right-click to repeat, and I'll do this side there, and I'll do this side there. Okay, so I've beveled those together. You see how there's a little bit of extra little hangover there? I'm going to have to ultimately trim those off and clean them up. But I'm going to go ahead and chamfer this edge and that edge as well. So let's go here and there and there and there. Okay? So now if we look at this, I really do have some extra little edges that are hanging off. And I really need to do a trim to clean that up. So what I'll do is I'll use this Polyline tool, and I'm going to draw a point, or basically a triangle, that goes between these 3 points, like that. Can you guys see that triangle there? Right? I'm going to use that then as a trim. So I'll type trim, or go up to edit and trim, and then I'll get rid of these little pieces that are sticking out. And so you may find that when you get this, it's really hard to kind of zoom on this. See how it's moving the whole object around? I want to focus in on this little piece. So I'm going to use a trick that's called zoom selected. So in the middle of this command, I'll type Z, enter, and then I'll type S for selected. And it's going to reorient my entire view on the one object that I have selected, which is very, very convenient because now I don't care what's going on beyond. I'm just focused in on this one object, which will let me then trim off a few more pieces, like that. And I end up with kind of a nice little chamfered corner there. Okay. Once I'm done, I'll hit enter. And then I have a triangle here, so I can use the patch command. So I'll type patch. Or I'll go up to surface and then patch. The only trick is that it gives us way too many U and V spans, so I'm going to change this to 2 and 2. As soon as you do it once, every subsequent patch will always be 2 and 2. I don't know why they specify 10 by 10. It's just too many. For right now, it doesn't really matter, but when you get into rendering, it'll become more annoying. Okay? So I'll go ahead and say OK. And I now have that little corner that's kind of clipped off nicely. Okay? So I'll continue and I'll do this side. And part of the reason that I'm asking you to do this at this level of detail is you're going to start to get really good at thinking about these in 3 dimensions. And it takes a while to get used to how Rhino works and to see it clearly in 3D. So this is a really good exercise, and it's designed to take you all day today to do these little corners and get ready for it. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this. I'll go to my Polyline tool again. And I'm going to go to each one of these corners. And then I'll use this little triangle again, and I'll trim. And again, it's not, I'm no longer oriented around that. So I'll type Z for zoom, S for selected. Now I'm oriented right on this point, so I can flip it around. And we'll go ahead and trim off this piece, and that piece, and that piece, and that piece. All right, looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And then I'm going to use patch, so it's surface, and then patch here. And like I said, as soon as you change it once, everything afterwards will be 2 by 2. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And so now I end up with those 2 corners. Okay. I'm not going to worry about this corner here, but I do want to continue the chamfer down here. So let me do a chamfer again. So I'll go surface, chamfer surfaces. I'll pick this surface and that surface. I'll also pick this surface, and that surface. Oops, come on. There and there, which gives me that corner. Okay. We have a little issue here that's going to involve a little bit of tweaking, and I'll show you how to do that, but it's a little bit more advanced in terms of how you fix that corner. Okay. And I'll continue on, and I can do this one and this one, and work my way up the other side. This one and this one, 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 and like that. Okay, so I'm working through this first half. Okay, I could do this front, but I'm not gonna bother. I think it's fine the way it is. So let me go ahead and work on one of these corners. I'll use my Polyline tool again and go corner, corner, corner. Then we'll use this as a trim. Again, I'm not oriented around this object, so I'll type Z for zoom, S for selected. And then we'll get rid of these little extra pieces here. Those are all nice and clean. I'll hit enter to finish the command, and then go to surface, and then patch. Say OK. And there's my corner. All right, one more time on this corner. Polyline, triangle. Trim. Get rid of this. There I am. I'll hit enter, and then go to surface, patch. We'll go ahead and say OK. All right. So as I said, this can be a little bit problematic here because of these. So this brings up a very good point about modeling, and that is this scale, right? At this scale, we have a little hole. Maybe not. Come on, projector. All right. So I have a little hole that's right here. Okay. If I zoom out to about this level and I were to render it, I'd never see it. Okay. Likewise, if I zoom out to this level, I'm definitely not going to see it. So you have to think about when you're modeling how tight you're going to make a rendering, and that will determine how accurate you have to be. So do I really need to fix this little problem? No. However, if we're going to take this and go 3D print it, right, that will be a big problem. So we want to go ahead and fix it while we can. And this involves a few more steps to really get this accurate. And that is we have to start looking at this as a set of objects. And we can fix it either with this upper object or with the lower object. But one or the other, instead of being a flat surface, is going to have to twist a little bit. And so we have to do that twist. And so in reality, right, if we were pouring this concrete, we could twist the form a little bit and it would end up being fine. Or we could just finish it by hand and it would be fine too. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the points on for a particular object. And I can pick either this or this as I turn it on. It doesn't make any difference. So I'm going to go ahead and type points on. Right? And we see that I get this little point there. Okay? Now, I already did a chamfer, and it already trimmed off a little triangle. So if I were to move this point, so let's say I type move, and I move this point. I have to turn on point snap here. So I move this point to here. Right? The trim moves with it, so I have that little triangle. So I'm going to use a different command first, and that's called untrim. Right? It's the opposite of trim. So I'll type untrim, and I'm going to pick this edge here. And see how I get that the piece back that I were to trim off? Untrim is a really great command because sometimes you just want a piece back that you got rid of. Now, if I take this little point, oops, I have to actually select the point. Come on. How nice. Won't let me pick the point. Let me go ahead. Oh, I'm in the middle of command. That's my fault. All right. Let me take this object, points on again, and I'm going to pick this point, and then I'm going to go to transform, move, and I'm going to move this point from here to right there. And so now if we look at it, this bevel meets up perfectly with the edge there. So those two are fine. This surface extends a little bit past where we want it to, right? But if we come down here to the center, right, it meets nicely there, but it extends a little too far here. So now we have to do a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to use this surface here as a trim, and I'll trim off this edge. Right? And you can kind of see it there. See how it twists just a little bit? That's what I'm doing. And I could come back to this edge, and we could use, say, this one, and I can trim and get rid of that little piece there. Okay? So that's one method for how to fix this, and you can see that it comes together quite nicely. The other method, which might be a little bit simpler, right, would be to go ahead and delete this surface that I just created and come back to my 3 or 4 corner points and say I want a surface that goes from here to there, and to right there. And when I create that, I've basically created the surface that I just made using the other method. Okay? And I can use this to then trim off that piece right there. And so now I have a watertight closed object. So the point being, there's a lot of different ways of doing this, and I'm just going to encourage you to experiment and kind of play around. When you get to these lower pieces, have me come over and we'll talk through it, what the right strategy is. Okay? Once I've gotten to the point where I have all of these pieces made, and I saved myself a little bit of trouble because I did them in the front, so I'll take this and we'll mirror it to the back. Like that. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and assign it a material and do a render. But what I want to do so I don't overload you right now, right, is I'm going to save my work and then let you all work for a while, and then in another hour or so I'll come back and do the rendering part. Okay? Okay, so as promised, at 1, I'm going to start talking rendering stuff. Recognize that your exercises are always pass, not pass. So however far you get is okay, but you want to use the time that you have to improve. Right? The more work you do, the more time you spend on it, the better you're going to be down the road. So the practice is good, and that's the point. So you guys seem to be picking things up rather fast, so I'm going to dump a little extra rendering that I normally don't dump on you yet, because you seem to be picking it up. And if you don't pick it up, that's okay. We're going to cover it in depth as we go forward anyway, but I figure it's worth a shot for you. Okay? So a lot of what I'm starting with in the beginning is repetition of what we did last class, so there's nothing wrong with repetition. I have my object, and I had 2 of them. I deleted one of them so that I'm simplifying things a little bit. The first thing that I need to do is I need to start setting up my scene in general. And so I need there to be a ground, so I'm going to add a Vray infinite plane, which of course conveniently my toolbar isn't loaded. Gotta love it, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a couple things to make sure that it's there. The first thing is I'm going to go to the render menu and I'm going to go to current renderer, and I'm going to make sure it's set for Vray for Rhino, which mine is set for Vray for Rhino. Okay? Unfortunately, I'm missing the toolbars, so I'm going to go to the digital tools site. And I'm going to go to Resources, Downloadable Resource Packages. And at the bottom of the list, I have Download Vray Toolbars for Rhino. You shouldn't ever have to do this. This is the problem we're having with all the computers. Eventually, we'll fix it, I hope. Okay? But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and click on that and then download it. Oops. I don't need to log in. I just need to download it. And it's going to go to my Downloads folder, which is just fine. I'll switch back to my Rhino, and I'm going to go to Tools, Toolbar Layout, and I'm going to open up my Vray for Rhino toolbar. So I'll go to File here, and then Open, and I just put it in Downloads, so I'll open Vray for Rhino, and then my toolbars show up. I apologize that you have to go through those steps. Some of the computers, it'll be on it, some of it won't, but at least you know how to get it, if so. You can, of course, access all of this stuff by the command line, so you don't really need the toolbars, but people tend to like using them to click on, so that's why I show you how to load them. First thing that I'm going to do is add the Vray infinite plane underneath. This is different than just a regular plane. It is a very specific thing for Vray. When I click on it, it will make a plane that goes off into the horizon for me. Now, I'll also notice that my object here, because I modeled some of it below the ground, right, is lower than my plane. And so I really want to fix that. So I'm going to click and select my object, and I drag a box not from the right to the left, but instead from the left to the right to select. If I were to click on the plane, it's going to drag the plane. I don't want that. So I have my view such that I can actually start my selection up here in the sky and select my whole object. I'm then going to use the transform move command, or just type move. And this one I want to move vertically because I want it to go straight up in the air. So I'm going to click on vertical, or type V for vertical. And then I'll click on my object and I'll pull it somewhere up above the ground plane. Right, so it's floating there. It doesn't matter how high it is. Right? So I have my object set. Now the next thing is I need to set a light. And so, like we did before, I'm going to use the directional light, which of course doesn't show up on my toolbar, but it's right there. And I'm going to draw a box first, because the boxes always help me to set up the directional light. right? Something like that. And then I'll click on Directional Light. It's going to ask me for the end of the vector, which would be here. The start of the vector should be there. And now I have a light that's going roughly from right to left. You can do it whatever direction you want, and it doesn't matter. And then I'll delete the box. The point is that I have a light that's shining on my object. Okay? So there's my basic directional light. That's in place. If I were to render right now, right, I'd end up with something like this that's just way, way, way too light because my object is white, my ground is light, and my light is shining on both of them. So I need to add some material to my object. And so I'm going to go to my Vray material editor, and I'm going to load up a concrete material. So I'll right-click on Scene Materials and go to Load Material, and I'll go to my resources on my flash drive, and we'll go into concrete. And I have a variety of concretes that I could choose. I'm going to choose a basic concrete with no seams for right now. So I could do basic or I could do no seams. I'll click on it and say Open. And I'll now see just kind of a basic concrete showing up. I'll do it again, don't worry. Okay. So if I wanted a different material, I didn't like this one, I'll right-click on Scene Materials, and I'll go to Load Material. And I'm picking, this is, remember last class we downloaded the big material archive on our flash drives? I went into that material archive on my flash drive, I went into concrete, and I picked one of the concretes. Okay? I could pick the rough board form, for example. And I'll go ahead and click on Open, and that will load up. Right? And I can see the texture of it there. Okay? So now I want to apply this to my object. Right? And remember I have a choice. I can apply to the object or I can apply to the layer. Either way. Now, because of the way that I modeled the scene, everything's on the same layer. I don't want the ground to have concrete applied to it. So I need to be able to select just the object. So I'm going to once again adjust my view so that I can select only my object. Right there. The other option would be to put the infinite plane on its own layer and then lock the layer, in which case you can't select it even if you're looking down on the object, which is in reality what I would do. Okay? Then I'm going to go back to my material editor, and because I have the object selected, I'm going to right-click, and we'll do the no seam first, and I'll say Apply Material to Selection, which is then going to apply the concrete material to this object. All right? Once I have that, I'm going to go back into my Vray options, which was the O. And I really should go back through my settings and make sure that they're all set. Remember, we did this last class. I'm fairly confident that all the defaults are going to be just fine, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'll just take a quick scan to make sure, yes, the lights are on. Right? My hidden lights are off. That's good. It has a low thread priority. That's good. The rest of this is fine. Right? I'm going to go to Environment, and I'm going to change the background to be white so that I don't have that black sky. Right, we'll give it a white sky. So those are set there. My output is already set. That's fine as well. All right, so I'll go ahead and close this. And then I'm going to click on the render button here, and we'll let it go ahead and render. All right, and so we're getting a decent quality here. We've got a shadow that's being cast, which is good. That's what I wanted. If I were to look at this closely, though, the texture is a little bit big. Okay, so this right here where we are is all that's required for what you're posting today. Right, so I can go ahead and save it, and I can post it. But like I said, I feel like you guys are doing pretty well, so I'm going to dump a little extra on you just in case you want to do it. Okay. And that is that we have something in Vray that's called texture mapping, which means how is the material applied to my object. And we're not going to get into the intricacies of it, but I'm going to actually change it slightly for this object. So this object looks roughly square, correct? Okay? So in an ideal world, I would apply a texture mapping that applies to the sides as if it's kind of a square object. And so what I'll do is with all of the objects selected, I'm going to go over here to my properties, right? And on the third object over, so I have object, material, and I have texture mapping. So this little kind of checkerboard thing, I'll click on it, and you'll see that there's some presets. And one of the presets says Apply Box Mapping. So I'll go ahead and click on Apply Box Mapping. And I'm going to look up here at the command line, and I accidentally clicked through too far. Hold on a second. Box mapping. First corner of base or bounding box. We'll just do a bounding box. And then the rest of these defaults are fine. World, I want it capped, and that's it. Okay? So it really wasn't that hard, but it changed how the material was applied. So I can go ahead and go to render again. And the material is now going to wrap across and down each of the sides. And you can kind of see that it's done that now. It's the same scale, but it wraps up and over the sides. Okay? This is probably a little bit too textured for what it is, but we're getting there. Okay? So let me go ahead and change the material that's applied. Let me go to my materials here, and I'm going to change to this one with the board forms on it. And I'm going to say Apply Material to Selection. And now I'll render again. And we can see some more stripes on the side, what that looks like. Let me go ahead and zoom, change this so that's more like this, and then we'll render. So in this sense, you can see that the board forms, right, actually wrap around each of my sides. And you can start to see this is looking like it's a real piece of concrete, right, because it has the texture, it has the little bit of extra goo in between the boards, etc., right, and it has the little pits that are in it. So this is kind of the direction that you can ultimately go, where you start to push the envelope of the texture. We will cover texture at far more detail. I don't like how the board form is applied to the bottom of this, so there's ways of changing that, but it's more advanced than you are thus far. But by applying the box map, you can actually wrap the texture around your object like it is here. Okay? And so you feel free to use any of the concretes. If any of it's fine. Once you're done, you'll go ahead and click and save the rendered object. And so I'll save this as exercise 205. And I'll click on Save. And this is the image that I'm going to post today for my work. Do make sure that you go to File, Save, and you save the .3dm file, right, the Rhino.3dm, because you're going to need this down the road. Right? You're not going to need it. You might need it next class. Okay? So you just want to make sure that you have that saved. Are there any questions about the rendering? Remember, infinite plane, light, material. And if you feel like it, do the box map. Yeah?
How do you open the toolbox again? Like I downloaded it?
Okay. So go to Tools, Toolbar Layout, which will bring this up under Rhino Options. You'll go to this little File menu, and you'll go to Open, and then go to your Downloads folder and load it up that way. Right? In rare instances, when you go ahead and load it, the checkboxes won't be checked, in which case you have to check them, but usually they come pre-checked.